Welcome to another episode of Design on Purpose, the WordPlay Studio podcast. If you are on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Give us a like, leave a comment if any of this content resonates with you. And if you're on Spotify as well, give us a follow. Today, Sunday morning here in Murwillumbah. Welcome, Fred Schebesta.
What's happening? What's going on? You guys have all tuned into the right podcast right now.
That's right. That's right. Did you expect to be in Murwillumbah this morning?
I expect the unexpected.
Yes.
I create the unexpected.
I sense that about you. Yeah, I sense that about you. How does that go? Like, it feels like you're in like you're quite intuitive with the way you work and, operate.
Yeah, I think I say yes a lot of the time, more than no's, and then see where that leads, and then just keep saying yes, and then eventually sort of wind it back a bit after you've spent all the energy, and then restart again and go again and again, and then end up in sick places like this.
That was cool, and it's nice to kind of show you around a bit and bring you to the northern rivers and the beautiful Mount Wollumbin out here in Murwillumbah, and share a bit of the lobster shack with you. And yeah, it's been awesome, and it was really nice to meet you in person yesterday at the crypto conference.
It's funny how fast things manifest too, because like it was only a few weeks ago, we're like, oh wait, it wasn't a few weeks ago, it was a few weeks ago we reached out to you to try and get you into the shack, and it wasn't really like logistically a good, gotta happen, and somehow we're here right now in the shack. We're like, oh my gosh, how do we make that happen? But so thanks for agreeing, and also it's kind of your idea to get up at the crack of dawn this morning and get it done. So thank you for the enthusiasm.
I think it's like part of your book, be proactive, just get it going, set it up. There's more manifestation will come. At least we kicked off with one thing today.
Yeah,
it'd be awesome. Yeah,
it like puts you in a real state of flow, doesn't it?
Yeah, early, do something, and then whatever else you get after that, it's just, like you're playing pinball and you like unlock the multi-ball. I think like if you just do something first, then you get like all the rest of the other balls start coming in. So, every day is a great multi-ball opportunity.
Yeah, that's it. And is that how you generally live your life? Like you generally live by the rule of thumb of like getting something done early on in the day? We heard a little bit about your sleeping schedule. It sounds interesting.
Yeah. So I think I just, I have sort of, I don't really have like a solid task list. I suppose I should in some way. But I sort of, I think my task is very organic in that it's kind of programmed into other people, and then they're coming back to me with the thoughts or responses. And most of those are sort of sent out between the hours of, 3 to 5 a.m., give or take a few hours either side. And a lot of people think that I'm overseas because that's why I'd be messaging. But then they realize I'm actually in the same city as them, and then those messages at 3 a.m. were actually at 3 a.m. And then their responses back normally reminds me of why I was thinking of that idea, and then starts me on that trajectory.
Yeah.
And so, we've got a sort of a flow started, and sort of put stuff out, and then it sort of comes back and then can keep going. And then I sort of have an overriding top one idea that I'm really passionate about, and everything sort of manifests in some way around that. There might be other things other threads that are going on, but there's normally one big thing that I'm most concerned about. And I'm constantly thinking about what is that number one priority. And then I'm just always coming back to that and talking about it, and listening in like, which is, I don't know if there's multiple threads, but there's normally a main priority in some way, shape or form. And I think that mixes in with, when I think of sleep, I think of it, not so much as a programmed thing, but more like something when I'm like tired.
Yeah.
Or if I'll go, I'll eat if I'm hungry. Like I regularly skip meals because I'm like, I'm just not really into it. It doesn't feel right now for me. So I just let that go. And when my body says, oh, you're hungry, you're like, oh, sweet. Okay, I'm hungry now. Now that's the time to go and find something to eat potentially. Or so it's kind of like some people call it Schebesta standard time. So once you come on the time zone, then this is how it's going to be. And you're like, that's my train's going like this. And you can hop it on and off the train and come with me on that journey.
Yeah.
But the train's going this way. It's a railway line. And, I think that's, and then, but you jump on the train and then you make the train go faster. And obviously there's lots of seats on the train and people come and join the train. And then we go on these journeys and where they go and where they lead, they're obviously on creative and vast journeys. But I think that those sort of manifestations start, as I said, I think one of the things I went through, so after I always had a lot of challenges and I've done a lot of things and made a lot of errors as well, a lot of mistakes. And a lot of them have taught me a lot. Some are just, multiple, the same problem. You make a mistake twice, it's really annoying. Do it 3 times, it's ultra annoying. Can happen, tend to not happen, but
what do they say? First time's an accident, second time's a mistake, or something like that.
Yeah, and then the third time is just like poor planning. I think that after I separated from my ex-wife, she's an amazing person, by the way. Lots of love for her. She's incredible. Her name's Jess, and we go traveling together. Like we're like really great friends and stuff. But it was a bit of a dark time for me. And in that transition, I had all this extra time, and I didn't know what to do because, like, once you separate from a partner, you don't have as much time. You're on your own, and I'd forgotten how to have fun. Like I just didn't know. I was like, how do I have fun? I know this sounds an unusual thing, but normally, in life, if you filled your space up with a lot of time of other things, you're interacting with another person, interacting with your kids, and then if you half that, you have a whole series of time that's now available. And so I was like, I don't know what to do with this time. And so my approach and answer was just go and say yes. So if someone says, hey, do you want to go salsa dancing? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not really a dancer. And I was like, yes. And so I would turn up and like, oh, okay, I'll figure this out. But it would lead to, hey, do you, are you really into, like, so when I was in New York, I was like by myself, 2015, and I had no idea what to do. I was like, I didn't know anyone. So actually, no, this is 2016. And I was, living in the Lower East Side, and I didn't know what to do when the weekend came. I knew what to do during the week because I was working and I was like super excited, and I just fill most of my time up with working extra. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I really like chess. So I literally just walked to a chess club. I've never like walked to a chess club before. And I was like, I used to play this when I was a kid. So I just like, walked in and I sat down at the table. This guy just owned me, like just 3 games in a row, just smashed me. And I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty, that's pretty brutal. And I was speaking to the guy and he's like, hey, and you obviously you like games. I'm like, yeah, I love games. He's like, well, there's a board game shop across the road. You can go in there and play games. You want to go and play some more games. You love strategy, clearly. I'm like, yeah. So I only just met this guy across the table of a chess board. And next minute he said, do you want to do this? Yes. And then just yes, 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 yes. And eventually I ended up like way up in Harlem one night playing a collective group of board games in a Whole Foods where we bought dinner because it was cheaper, and just hanging out with some new people. And, and then they invited me to a real life murder mystery that would like zombies versus someone that would happen in a park. And I was like, well, okay, this is a little bit too far for me. But I was like, okay, well, at least, I've unpacked that I love board games. So actually the games that he taught me were ones I brought to my kids, and there were games we still play today. And I really expanded and learned about that universe. I thought it's an incredible universe. And I've really reconnected with chess as well. I realized that's a thing I loved. And so, I went to and found myself, but I think the answer really, if I boil it down, was just saying yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's cool to kind of live like that. I've definitely had some experiences, some of my best experiences just getting into flow and like you're saying, just saying yes and going with it and seeing where it takes you. But is that how you run your business as well? Like do you take that kind of approach with a company? Because it sounds like there's strategy, you're into strategy, but then there's also this intuitive side.
So I think there's different phases inside any organization. And, I think in the beginning, like very early on when there's nothing, like I perform like my sort of, if I was to sort of, rate and review my performance, I'd say I'm extremely productive and can contribute a lot at the very beginning. In the middle, I'm pretty good. Towards like as the project really takes off and really is going, less effective and probably more of a disturbance than an actual ad. Yeah. Because, once it's all set up and really going, that intuition is actually requires a lot of, change. It requires a lot of consultation, alignment, all of these things, which I'm playing like from like all of these things that which sort of I think about aren't. It's very difficult to go and explain where did this come from. It's like, well, I was in, San Francisco and I met this guy and he told me this one thing about his business. And then someone else in London said this. And then the other day I was down at this fish and chip shop and they did this. And I thought this was really interesting. And I combined those three ideas together. Then I kind of like evolved that to this idea. And this is how I arrived. And I think this is what customers want because I was speaking to this customer about this. And therefore I think we should go and do this. And like, that's got no data. That's got like, and a lot of those things, I'd say like, they're real rolls of the dice. And it just so happens that those rolls I tend to, win a lot more than I lose.
Yeah.
I definitely lose in those as well. And so that intuition that sort of is got all sorts of formats of data and input that I've taken in and I've, thought about and researched. And so, that's sort of in the beginning is really strong because you trying to discover and figure out like what's going on and where should we go? What should we pivot? What should we do? Whereas as an organization evolves and grows, that's not ultra constructive. It's about, operational effect, operational excellence, capital allocation, and those kinds of debates I love to get involved and enjoy, but it's a different set of skills, which means that I'm not necessarily the best person to operate and run a company as it grows. And I, from the very early on, I always essentially established Finder from the very start to essentially replace myself continuously.
Yeah.
And eventually I got to a point where I actually, I'd say actually I'm at that point now where I'm not operationally involved. Like I don't run the going concern of the organization. I don't manage a P&L. I'd say probably 4 people report to me, which, sounds unusual, but obviously I would say I'd probably like the chairman of the board to some extent if there's 2 people on the board, which is the 2 founders of Finder. But I think, and so, I think that intuition is really a product or where that success comes from, like to increase your intuition and get more success. It's just have more experiences and just take a lot of experiences of mistakes and then that means then, I've got that, that hurt. Okay, I'm going to avoid that. That means therefore I'm going to go do this. And so your subconscious, makes good dice rolls.
Yeah, it's like and especially with the creative process is so hard to know when magic's going to happen, but it's like in those moments, it's like I'm just thinking about my own life. Like when I have those life-changing ideas or things, it's usually not when you're at a computer desk or doing something monotonous or some repetitive thing. It's like usually like on a bus ride or like somewhere in some new environment that sparks the idea. But then and that's obviously like, I know you guys are really big on innovation at Finder, constantly evolving the product and everything. So, then it then gets passed along the kind of, the ball gets kicked into other fields to then keep playing with this idea, the idea and evolving the idea, right? And then obviously going into, more further along stages where it's, more regimented and things like that. But so how does that process work, and how does that, how do your teams work around, new products, new ideas?
So, I sort of break that into 2 categories. So there might be an underlying process or system that's already running in some shape or form, and you're introducing a new idea into it, and the organization pretty well ingests that quite well. Like, so we have a discipline of writing narratives, and we'll write those narratives and explain, what it is. So everyone has context then, and it'll link off to other narratives. So you can go back in time and understand the artifacts that build up to the overall picture of the organization to some extent. So documentation is pretty big in Finder. I think it's big in a lot of other organizations as well. This is not unique, but it's just something we believe in, because the bandwidth of the written word is super high. So there'll be some sort of document, and if there's not, that's normally where people will start. Or if there's some sort of unstructured time, so in my calendar I have a lot of unstructured time. It's just red desk time, blanked out throughout the day, and I put that in place because that's where I think a lot of these sort of meetings and unstructured ideas come from. I think the second one is when we are beginning something where we're doing something that no one's ever done before. So the organization has not done it before. No one else has done it before. And that's a different sort of process. And I think it's a very organic process where, we'll explore topics, and there's a sort of, chat rooms that we're just sharing ideas and concepts. And then we're coming in and presenting ideas and concepts that we like or enjoy or are passionate about. And we'll share that to each other, and then everyone, sort of an energy exchange and off, or we'll set each other up and go, hey, I'm reading this, and I think it's really interesting, this section here. And then other people will read that and go, oh, I got this idea and then that idea. And then it may just lead to some sort of genesis of a concept, but those concepts sort of, have some sort of, I guess, a space, and they're not necessarily any particular priority organization. It's very, expansive. And the way I sort of imagine it is, there's sort of two pictures. The one is, I think of naturally, is like a computer game. I don't know if you've played a computer game where you can't see all the map and you need to go and explore. And this would have been traditional, like with any other civilization. They don't know what's past there. And so they'd send people out there. And so I see like a wandering journey of turning up ideas and seeing what's around there, and basically bringing those all together in some way, shape or form. And you form sort of a picture of the map. And from that, then you that's where I think that's the bedrock of, hey, we've got all these sort of resources and ideas and concepts. And from that, you start riffing on things, and they'll have callbacks to other stuff. Like there'll be this beautiful idea that we love, and then we're like, we don't know what to do with this. All right, we'll just put this on the shelf and we'll come back to that, maybe, or maybe not. And go on to the next thing. And so there's like constant threads of discovery that may not lead anywhere. And so it's not like it's a very, very messy process, I would say. And what it tends to lead to, but eventually, is you'll get some sort of customer insight or tap into some deep zeitgeist that we're seeing starting to form, or a new white space that we've discovered, or something's changed. And it'll mean, because it's changed, because the world, we go to the place where it's moving and changing and growing and evolving. And in that space, we take this sort of armory of ideas, and we see some opportunity, and we'll take one of the things we've developed and put it in place.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of ready. You kind of, ready for deployment in some way, shape or form. And that's normally where these products come from. Again, that's a very messy process. Not exactly the most efficient process, I'd say, but I don't think it can be. I think it's just more just an overriding methodology of freedom of creativity and being okay with making mistakes, and then not, and also exploring ideas and being okay that they're not going to necessarily lead anywhere. It's just to nowhere. And you may never go back there, or you may at some point need to come back after you've figured something else out.
Or it might inspire some other thing that ends up eventuating. It's funny because we have a very similar kind of way of working in that. Like, we actually get companies to do those kinds of exercises with chat rooms, and, do more scanning and play, and like learning as much as you can, sharing what's the news we can use here. So, it's funny, isn't it? It's just quite cool. And, a big part of that is the environment, and storing these artifacts and then bringing them out when they're needed, these knowledge items or whatever. So it's like, what kind of environment do you create to facilitate that? And do you store these artifacts? And how do people access them, and when do you know is the time to bring them out?
A lot of them are written in narratives or drawn in pictures.
Okay.
So when we are doing this, one of our principles is like draw it or write about it, like bring something.
Yep.
And that becomes the basis of this basic storage in some way, shape, or form. The picture can capture it even better. Like that's like when you, and so we have some really creative people on our team, and they'll design something or write something, or just literally write a piece of code and literally write a little prototype, and it's right there. And I think that's it, so it needs to be taken from like, this is the concept I was thinking about too. Okay, let's discuss this thing we've got here, and that becomes the sort of cradle, I guess, and then the environment in which other seeds are planted, or things grow from that, or they don't as well. Sometimes it was just a journey we went down, and this is not like the right way to go. And we turn back and we start again. Which is pretty brutal, and I said that to a lot of people in this Finder Ventures team that's really the one I focus on a lot on a day-to-day basis. And this ventures team, I said from the beginning, it's like, you've got to be comfortable with doing a whole lot of work and then potentially just throwing it all away, which will happen. And not necessarily throwing it away, but just, parking it here because, we built a game for 4 weeks, like a full-on game. And then we were like, okay, we love this idea, but it's just not the right time. We don't have enough things. We just need to park it. And it's just sitting there. Or, we were like, we want to build chat. Chat's amazing. And we went down this journey, and then we sort of went, and we sort of, built up a prototype, got it to a live enough stage. And then we were like, this is not right. Something's not right here. And we shelved it again. And, there's a endless shelf of digital concepts and ideas that are sitting out there, and it's just about timing.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a real, I guess, way that you've defeated perfectionism in a way, which can be quite hard for people because, it's like always having to do something right or get something that leads to something else and getting some result. But you're talking about being okay to fail and being okay to, for this to just get to a point where you drop it, and having that faith that eventually it will come back around and will come into something else potentially, and it'll always make sense once, in hindsight, you're like, oh, that thing at that time led to this moment now. How does that, how did you, I guess, your own journey with that, having the confidence and learning to, I guess, explore and play and not have that, I guess, perfectionism sort of mindset. Seems like you've got a very open mindset because you're not just even playing in one lane too, there's so many lanes that you're making content around, sharing ideas about. It's like your identity is not just fixed to one spot. How has that process been for you, over your life? And
when I think about, I guess, this sort of boils down to pretty, I'd say the most important way this is expressed around me is the third value of Finder is go live, which is a bias to basically putting things live on the internet, launching, getting it out there, and getting feedback, and being okay with that it's imperfect from the start. Everyone knows that at Finder. Everyone's very comfortable. It's uncomfortable, but so the difference is you have to quickly get used to this degree of uncomfortableness at Finder by putting things live on the internet that aren't perfect and, all the edges done. And what that discomfort creates is more momentum, but it's like, oh, well, I really want to fix this. Or it maybe actually wasn't a great idea and we should just let that sort of simmer and, leave that there. It wasn't the right time. And other times it's like it drops and this has got a lot of momentum and everyone, then we can add more resources and capital. So it's really a testing of capital allocation to a large degree in a low cost way. I think zooming out, I don't know exactly where this process came from, but I probably, don't have a large degree of, I just don't sit there and analyze and think through data and come up with my ideas from that. They come from just literally, like, I don't know the answer to this and what exactly this would happen. I could probably go and read about it and theorize about it, but I'll literally just go and sample it. Just take a little bite or touch the wire a little bit, or, like just do a little bit of it and just like, little taste of this berry just to see if I'll die. To a large degree, it's just a large amount of sampling, and I very quickly you get signal versus noise. Then, it's like you quickly cross over to discover and find this territory. But once you're over there, you start to find all these problems, right? And I think naturally, inside an organization, people love problems. And they love going and solving problems. You identify problems. Hey, this is a problem. Here's a problem here. Because the natural answer, people love, it's a problem. We need to solve a problem. Solving problems is what humans naturally are very good at. And they think organizations are really good at. It's like, we have a problem, let's go and solve problem. What's not natural is to go, let's go and create a whole lot of problems. That's in a brand new territory. That's not a natural thing to do. That's like, whoa, we're going to get up and leave this comfortable whole climate and zone that we've solved all these problems for, and go to a place that we have lots of unknown problems and potentially go and do that. No, we don't need to do that. And I'm like, my natural state is like, yeah, let's go and see what's over there. And sometimes we get burnt from that a lot of the times, but it turns out okay, but we learn from it. We're like, oh, there are volcanoes there. That's not that great. But then in the future, oh, there are volcanoes there. Maybe we could use that for energy. Or it can be like, let's say we're volcanoes because we don't do too well with the volcanoes because we're in the ice business. So like, I think that's important. Like, and where it comes from, I probably, go down, in a deeper sense for myself. I think it's just a natural state of curiosity. Like, I'm just constantly curious about just a lot of like the first principles of where things come from. How did they come to be like this? Why are they like this? And I think the first thing and I find this really fascinating, when I go to a big city or an old city, I love to look around and go and I see time. So it's like, oh, wow, look at this building. And that at that time, going back, 300 years, and it's been here for so long, that they went and made that decision. It's interesting why they would make that decision. There's a lot to learn from that. And I think like everywhere you go, unpacking that, I find that really interesting. It's like, oh, I see. They had to go and solve that problem. Oh, that's why that's like that. Like, why is there so much traffic in big cities? The roads are like really thin. Why they're so thin? Well, they just didn't have a lot of cars in the start. Just that idea, that's a basic idea, right? But from that, you can start to go, okay, well, you can start to go backwards and you'll see where the root causes of a lot of things are. And I think back there, unpacking things, I think you start to see a lot of fundamental principles, I guess, of humanity, and that'll always be there. And then I think you get a lot of, that's a place where I like to discover what those things are, and they're always evolving and changing. And I find that just interesting study of, like, I guess, human evolution.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we think about that stuff a lot too, don't we? And like in Australia, especially because we've had such a short span of time between, like, I guess, settlement or whatever and colonization of Australia, you can kind of see those layers, and sometimes they're quite thin, like in terms of what's happened in that span of time. And then, looking back even to the decisions that were being made by First Nations people about how they lived and in this harsh environment that we're in Australia. And yeah, there is a lot to be learned. There's definitely a lot to be learned from that. I was wondering about, the culture at Finder and you're talking about your way of working and exploring, and I was wondering about, how do you build a team around that? When it's just you and you start to kind of expand out and, want to build out some of these ideas, how do you maintain that your flow and culture and way of working and choose the people around you to be on that journey, on the train?
That's a good question. And I don't think that, again, I think it's a spectrum. So, and I think it changes. So I think the kind of people I work really well with are like Swiss Army knives. So, a Swiss Army knife's like got a little magnifying glass, and it's an okay magnifying, but it's just good enough. And it's got a little screwdriver, and it's like not like a full on, like you're not going to go and build a car with it, but you can do screwdriver stuff with it. And it has a little knife, and it has, a little chain, and it's super like adaptive, proactive, deals with all sorts of situations. And I work really well with people like that. Almost generalists to some extent, but then have a deep specialty in some particular framing, but are very prepared to understand and commit to the overall responsibility of what we are doing. So that person, a Swiss Army knife works really well in the beginning, but over time it decays in value. So like once you started a full-on production line of, say in Finder, we have this huge education content pipeline. Like, we would produce tens of thousands of pages a year, and all edited, all curated, all, deeply thought about. Like it's quite a process, right? And in that circumstance, you need a real deep expert in editing. Not just like, and deeply understand a particular niche or vertical that they're writing about. So deeply understand personal loans, car insurance, cell phone plans, internet, whatever it may be. Like you can't just have like a Swiss Army knife sort of writing about that particular topic, right? And so the effectiveness of that person changes over time. And so in the beginning, a lot of the things I work on, they're at the start. And so really, a specialist is not going to be, they're too down a particular path. They're not able to look up and go, okay, where is the boat actually going right now? As opposed to just really rowing really, really fast because they're great at rowing. Yeah. So finding those people, I think, I'm not exactly sure what my methodology is, but it's a lot to do with intuition, I think. And I can kind of sense it with the level of responsibility people take. Yeah. So a great little test, I think, is if I'm having an interview with someone and you finish the interview, I check, this is a very unusual one, but I see, did they clean up after themselves? If you give them a drink, they say, oh, I need to go, and put this away. And because they're thinking of the whole system. Like a meeting room is part of a system of an organization, and they're thinking about the whole thing and not just, themselves, and it's their career and their, that whole journey. It's actually, they're part of a bigger ecosystem. And I think that kind of is it's a small test, but there's a series of tests I, think about. Like I don't give the address of where the interview's happening. Like if you can't use Google and figure out where our office is, then we've got an issue, right? To a large degree. I think, but these are like sort of, I've written a list of sort of qualities that I look for. And, these qualities are just things which I believe are very effective. And we hired a lot of those people in the start of Finder, and people who, didn't quite align to that. It didn't really work out. And then over time that's changed, and you have, a lot more specialty. And so it's a progression and a spectrum of specialization to generalist, I think. Yeah. That's sort of how I see it.
That's so interesting. We've got a very similar philosophy. Well, we love holistic systems, looking at everything in entirety to really understand what the problem is. Otherwise you're just addressing a symptom, right? Yeah. And that's something we really like to get nerdy on too, is all that sort of stuff. And that's it. It's like being aware of that everything is connected and that everything speaks as well. That's one of our values, which comes from our teachers, Matt and Gail, that everything speaks. Every single thing that you do, whether it's like a physical thing or the way that something's presented, is creating some sort of, it's adding to the environment to create some sort of response. And it's interesting that's embedded in your way of hiring. Going I guess from where you are, in Sydney, then there's all these other offices around the world. How does that work? Like in terms of culture, replicating culture and making sure that it's the same, authentic place anywhere in the world, in all these different cultures, different, places. How does that work?
So I think we have some pretty strongly defined values, and they are like taught by the founders. They're taught by the leaders, because the leaders were taught by the founders, and then there's a sort of a cascading effect in that sense. We also have leadership principles. So there's 12 leadership principles of Finder, and they're sort of fundamental ideologies, I guess, within the organization. And it's pretty, these are two pretty important foundation documents. There's an overriding purpose, to help people make better decisions, help the world make better decisions. And if you always come back to that purpose in some way, shape or form, like it sort of, things come out. Like, are we helping people make better decisions? Well, yes. Okay, how can we do that for this? Okay, let's go down. And it's very easy to always come back to that. And it's a really good canonical, concept. And so I think, you've got the mission. We always talk about purpose. We always talk about our values a lot. It's like it's written into the channels. It's after the naming conventions of things in the organization. Like one of our first values called One Crew, which means there's only one team at Finder. We don't call anyone team, we call them crew. And so the rooms in Slack are named One Crew, Australia or US credit cards. And they're all of the people that come from the different disciplines together in one crew. And that's that idea that there's, obviously, little one crews, but there's an overriding responsibility that we're all change roles and work together to, take responsibility really together of the whole organization. And so, I don't know whether it's necessarily on purpose or not, but it's just very viral in our language. So in the beginning, we made sure the words were things we said. So we sat down and we collated together and we looked at the people that were in the organization. We said, okay, what are the types of people that we hire? What do they value? And we wrote down this massive spreadsheet. We still have the spreadsheet. And we collated to get them sort of together into some things. And we sort of titled them. We said, and we made sure that each of them are things we said. Like, so it became part of the vocabulary. So there's kind of like like when anyone sort of joins Finder, there's all these weird words that people don't understand.
Yeah.
And they have like very strong meanings, and they sort of, start to unpack them, and they realize like, oh, I can see what that is. And this sort of, I'd say is part of the culture, right? Is the virality of our language, the Finder language. And I think that, I think about that in terms of the English language or Spanish language, like, the virality of the English language is so strong. It's like, it like eats other languages, it like takes over. It's like wild how dominant that virus is. And that's sort of, I think, we sort of program that in terms of the words we say, and baking in those words of what we say are into our language. So people naturally speak the values. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is a lot of our rituals and celebrations are baked around these values as well. And everyone will talk about them, and they constantly reinforce, but they naturally come out. It's not like anyone's forcing you to say it, or you must say these values in the thing. It was just, we like saying those words because they're part of the words that we believe in, and everyone here values them. So when you're saying them, it's like if you say go live and Finder, people are like, yeah, let's get like fired up. We're going to launch something today. Like, this is on, like we're going to go live today. Ooh, what are we going live with? Like it's go live day. There's a go live channel. People are like jacked about it. We celebrate together. We celebrate going live, and then we celebrate other people. And that's, I guess, how, empower people is one of our values. And we really share the that, and it's a constant thing that happens. And I don't know exactly how that happened, but I think it was just the beginning. We always celebrate the crew in Finder very openly, lots of celebration, lots of rituals in that sense as a channel. And I think ceremonies. So we have a big ceremony that we do when someone hits 10 years, for example, at Finder. So you get a gold jacket. There's a Finder gold jacket. It's just like my jacket, but there's and that was just this sort of an invention actually of my partner B. She came up with this idea. She bought me a gold Finder jacket, and then we integrated it in part of the company. So, so anyone who's 10 years gets a gold jacket, and there's a full ceremony to it. Like you have a walk-in, there's a massive clapping. It's like a real hype up, and then it's like a full presentation about the person. Then it's like a full ceremony.
Wow.
And then you get presented with your jacket.
It's like getting a black belt or something. It's
Cool.
It's like you become, that's like you join. There's a secret club that you come and join. But that's because this is the rite of passage to inside Finder. We believe in mastery, deep, long. That's our fifth value, is master your craft. To becoming a master of whatever you do, it takes a long time to master things, like deeply master things to become truly masterful at something. And so that's that ritual, that ceremony reinforces that value. So what is this person a master at? That's our fifth value. The ceremony is a big deal because they become a master in this. Let's celebrate that person. And there's a sort of just a natural reinforcement again of the values. And so those things get publicized a lot and they get recorded. And I think that's that virality and that's the spreading of Finder's culture.
so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Frank Lloyd Wright would say it takes 50 years to become an architect. It's like,
and mastery, what's that? There's another one. It's like mastery can't happen by yourself. Like you need the teacher.
You need the master.
It takes more than a lifetime
to
become
get the
a
mastery.
master without a teacher. So
you gotta. It's like that hero's journey, right? You gotta go into the woods and meet the teacher, find the master, learn the teachings, and then apply it. And hopefully you get to the point where you're also at mastery.
Yeah.
Super cool. And at what point did you? When was it the right time to kind of articulate these values? At what point in the journey?
It was pretty early on. I think we were. One of the co-founders of Finder, Jeremy, was really big on it, and Frank and I had built values into our previous company, but we just didn't do. There were three of them, and they just weren't as. I don't know, like they were good and they were celebrated, and there was a little ritual around it. I just felt we could do better, in our second company, and everything. Second time around, you do a little better because you've made it. Again, version 1 versus version 2. I think we were trying to codify and scale the organization and create an artifact of what we valued. Actually, in the beginning, there's actually been a version 1 of our values and there's a version 2. So the first one actually had 7 values and now the current one has 5. So it sort of condensed it down and made it much more, just a bit easier to digest with 5. 7 was a lot, but
we've got 12.
They're very raw. And they're really good in that sense. What I think is interesting is when we look at our values, we also sort of define what we don't value, which is kind of, we've written this up in a document to say what's the opposite of this that we don't value. So like go live is a value. So we're not about perfectionism is not a you talked about that before. It's not a value of ours. We will but go live continuously and to a point of mastery. But when we launch, we put something out there and we just get feedback and we build from there. And it's almost a bit like building the plane while it's flying, to some extent. That doesn't mean we don't plan. We plan a lot. We just don't need every single data point to go live. Like we are okay with taking risk. And so, that's where the variability and the upside comes from. If you don't take risk, then, it also means we tend to launch faster. So, one of our sort of ideas is it's called Finder First, and we just sort of get things out there really quickly and be first. And just, it's something we believe in. It's a principle. It's sort of not a principle, actually. I'd say it's a playbook.
Yeah.
And so I think that timing is important. Maybe, I always think about it in the start of an organization. But when you have the kind of first core team of any organization, I think that's a great time.
Yeah.
Because, you hit that sort of nice lock-in point. Like everyone here is the people we want. Okay, what do these people value? What is everyone here all about? And codify that.
Yeah.
So interesting. There's so many good points in here. Like one, like you don't know what the value of your yes until the value of your no. It's like, and that's pretty much what you're saying, knowing what the opposite of your values are helps you solidify what your values are, what they aren't. It's so interesting, and I find it so fascinating as well, like all the ceremonies and the artifacts and the words. Words are spells, but it's also part of culture. Every culture has a language, but they also have artifacts, symbols, things that have
Clothing.
meaning to an organization that creates resilience. Like that's what a great strong culture is, where people live and breathe the values, but everything has a message, has a meaning, and it's all part of that. I find that so fascinating. Where's the limit with Finder? Like, because it seems like you've just kind of been on this amazing journey, nailing all these bits intuitively, going, we need values or this. It's like at the right times and growing to, what is it, 350 people or something like that. Where do you feel like the limit is, or do you even think about that? Is it like, how do you see the future, and where are you going now?
Yes, I think I've recently learned about that idea of finite journeys versus just keeping the game going. And I think naturally we set up Finder to just be an organization that was all about surviving and enduring. We were a bootstrap company. We do things a little more. We work fast, but we're okay with overridingly being a little slower in terms of how big those mistakes are and how. So we sort of limit that down. It may mean we're a little slower, but in terms of complete rollout of Finder, but we do experiment a lot. And the idea is really to create a like a 1,000+ year organization. So it's like a different masterpiece, right? It's a different way of looking at things. And so we think about things which are scalable and not scalable. So like birthday cakes are not scalable. So we don't do birthday cakes because you can't go and deliver a birthday cake to all the people at Finder, right?
Everyone every day.
It's just, there's someone's birthday probably every day. And lots of people have the same birthday. It doesn't work. So, but if you think about that, we're thinking about that long-termness and planting infrastructure, planting ideas and seeds that will last a very long time. So a lot of our horizons are quite a long way out, but we do update and continuously review that and talk about it and reinforce it and talk back to it. And so a large thing, as an example, we've been working on is this membership idea to join Finder. Like no one really joined Finder before. Like why would you join Finder? And that's where we built this app, and this app obviously serves members and provides services. And we're now going to bring that into our website, which is that was really the testing ground. Yeah. Again, this idea of innovating and creating a space to do that. And so I really see this cycle of innovate, serve our customer, find something new and another way to do that, and help them obviously make better decisions, and do that in a constant way over a long period of time. So what are some vectors of that? One, there are just more decisions that need to be made, right? There's just more stuff. And constantly, once you leave home from your parents, that's when basically you get a whole bunch of new decisions that you need to make. what insurance do I going to use? Which bank am I going to bank with? Just starting from there and it goes like, obviously, massively from there. And a lot of people didn't have those decisions, right? You go back in time. People used to bank with the same bank that their family banked with. That was just what you did. And a lot of people just didn't leave home for a long period of time. That was just not something, that's actually a new idea. So it's actually not because the structure of society now is that there's a lot of institutions and organizations that can support you if you fall down. And like an insurance company, if you have an accident, it'll, pay you money and you can continue on. Whereas you go back in time, there's no such thing as that. You have an accident, like you're going to fall down. And so the family structure was the insurance. This will obviously continue on. I think that's a massive trend in decisions and people taking responsibility for their investments, self-investing and managing that. There's many things which are like, the responsibility is changing. People are taking on, and then they want to automate and sort of process in some way, shape or form. And I think that's the sort of massive wave of, that's the overriding meta tectonic plate that's going on. I think that's one vector. I think the other one is just a lot of automation. So, we've started this journey, a lot of technology, automating, understanding these ideas, decisions. Decisions are very hard to automate. That is an extremely subjective thing. Like it's just because, I'm, a single dad with 2 kids, and I'm looking to buy a car and, I've always loved this car. Then I go and buy like a Mini Cooper. Like, why did I do that? Like, it's very hard to unpack that. Yeah. It's like deep amounts of, neural knowledge that you need to program in.
Life not an easy experiences and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're starting on this journey and we sort of see that as a horizon to go towards and just taking out steps. So we're always thinking about, shortening the distance from, what you want to getting what you want and trying to shorten that in some way, shape or form. And, I think those sort of things combined together make basically a never ending quest and journey.
That's cool, eh?
It's very cool. Very cool. And, what about like your personal brand? That's something that is we're obviously into branding as well. And I think it's really unique when somebody has the self-confidence to put themselves in a or express themselves in a way with confidence that's different to everyone else, which you could clearly do. You've got your own vibe, you've got your style, and you're proud, and you've got your content. You're out there doing your thing. How has that journey been? I haven't actually. You put a TikTok up of you as like a young kid, like with a tan and a blonde hair and stuff, to where you are now. Like, how's that journey been of your I guess your personal brand?
That's so interesting. Like as a kid, I used to just ride skateboards and climb trees and set fire to things. Like.
I saw you set fire to your beard on one video.
I did do that as well. It was an accident, but that was not intentional.
So good as on camera. I like it.
I don't advise anyone to set fire to themselves.
That's why we don't do birthday cakes.
No birthday
not
cakes.
Scalable.
Not scalable. Setting fire to oneself, not scalable either. I think it was a conscious decision. If you look at the first, I'd say 7 years of Finder, I didn't speak on behalf of the company. I just didn't do that stuff. And it was very conscious. I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do my thing. And, I didn't do social media. I was like, no, I don't do that. And it was just a moment where like, okay, like maybe there's an opportunity to, like, you look at the other, like I like to speak. Like I'd go to events and I'd speak, and that's all I do. I didn't write a book. I didn't do anything. I just sort of went to an event, spoke, and then just left. Everyone was like, "Oh, what can I get more?" And I was like, "I don't know. Not really into that." That's all you got. Yeah. That was it. Bye. So, and that happened for a long period of time. many, many, many years. And really there was a moment in time we sort of said, okay, maybe this is something, I enjoy, I like to do. And I'm naturally, this is just who I am. This is just this person. And we were like, okay, maybe there's a brand around this. All right, let's just see what would happen. And so then we started thinking, started to think of myself as a product. And that's a very unusual thing to do. But what colors do I wear? How am I seen? What do I talk about? What's important to me? And a lot of these things just come out naturally, right? To a large degree. But I just sort of structured it a lot more and started to curate that. And then we started to set up processes around this. This is something we would do. This is something we would focus on. And it's about, the amount of attention.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that I was probably ready in the past. I was really learning about myself to a large degree over the last, say, 6 years. And I worked with an emotional coach called Craig Hall. He's a great guy, and lots of love for Craig. And, I think to a large degree, because I wasn't ready, I don't think I could have been that authentic if I did that in the past. So I think that sort of that and doing a large amount of work on myself, like unpacking my self-limiting beliefs, like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, losing, obviously some pretty heavy topics, right? Yeah. And there were self-judgments I had about myself and really releasing that. Then, making mistakes, like all these things, when I got sort of very comfortable with that, I can handle a lot more of the sort of the energy that comes with being very in a where your person is part of a product. Before that, I don't think I could have handled that.
Yeah.
So getting emotionally fit was probably I was extremely emotionally obese.
That's great.
Yeah, I was very emotionally obese. Like I was like just like way overweight. I remember my coach came in and said, "What was I like when you first met me?" He's like, "Well, when a person who's never gone to the gym ever and like has dined out on junk food their entire life goes to the gym for the very first time, yeah, that was you." I was like, "Oh, that's fair." Just like emotional obesity is, you dine out on negative thoughts, dine out on negative emotions, and you take this junk food and you ingest it. And it's like, oh, it's just there's a whole series of things. And then there's underlying beliefs that you need to go and really work out. That's like the carbuncles on that you've carried around since you're 7. So I think that's part of it. I think then that brought a lot of self-confidence, and it was something which I naturally enjoyed, and we just started to focus on it. And it's been just a venture in and of itself, like a business. And it was just, I think it was the right time.
Amazing. Yeah, we're kind of been on a similar journey, because once you actually start putting, like the more you put yourself out there when you've at that stage where you're wanting to, it's like such a liberating thing, isn't it? It's like you're free from the fears or the things that were, might have been stopping you, the programs, those thoughts ticking over about why you shouldn't do it, or what's not, what's wrong with it. It's so interesting. And just is that process and that personal development stuff, how did that or like correlate with Finder's growth at that time or through those years?
Yeah, so I think I definitely think the last 6 years I've made a lot of change. And I became the sort of the limiting factor of the company. And then once I got it out of the way, I think it allowed it to really grow a lot more and way beyond myself. And I think that's because, and that takes a lot of, it's a really hard conversation, right? Then when you're the problem,
Yeah,
which was not easy. I think of it like, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
So in Scooby-Doo, there's like a haunted house, and eventually, you know, it goes on, and what they find out is the house was actually deemed to be destroyed, and there was actually an original founder of the house that wanted to protect it, and they were constantly sabotaging anyone who wanted to try and overhaul the house. So they're sort of the ghost in the house, right? And you know, that's a classic story of what founders can do. They can be their ghost in their own house, trying to keep it the way it was.
Yeah.
And that just comes out naturally, right? Because you've made this thing, and you know you want to protect it, and you know every now and then things don't go my way, and you know I just sort of now let that go, and that's where it's supposed to go, and you know roll with that. But yeah, you don't be the ghost in your own company. You know, it's time sometimes to exit certain meetings or exit certain things, and that was really, I think, part of that journey.
Yeah.
Not everyone
Yeah.
who's a founder should be the CEO of their company.
Yeah. And like, how do you choose somebody to step in and become the CEO? Like when you're kind of unpacking that and realizing that, you know, you need somebody to step in.
And your identity's like
Yeah,
tied
yeah.
up as a certain role.
Yeah. How do you even approach that? Did you know somebody or?
So I think it's not an easy process, and there's several CEOs inside Finder that run different. There's one that runs Australia, one that runs the UK, and they're great operators. Lots of respect. It's just a long journey,
Yeah.
you know, to find someone like that. I think naturally, you know, the other founder of Finder, Frank, he just naturally is a CEO. It just, you know, comes to him naturally. Whereas, and I think it just came down to a conversation. It's a really hard conversation. It's like, hey, you know, one of us probably needs to be the CEO. You know, who do you think that's going to be? And I was thinking, maybe that's me. And afterwards, I realized probably that's not me. And, you know, you got to have that moment of self-reflection, which is really hard, like really hard. I don't think anything can really prepare you for that. I think it's just, you know, it's really a question of how far do you want to take this organization? What do you want to do with it? What's your goal? And if it's, you know, about succession and survival and endurance over long, long periods of time, then that's probably something you're going to need to face eventually.
And if the company's planning on being around for thousands of years, like you're saying, then it's going to have to face that probably multiple times. Did you see that Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia just gave his company away made Earth the only shareholder of Patagonia?
I didn't see that. No, that's amazing.
Isn't that cool? Because he's a really purpose driven guy. Like the company was started with the purpose around, you know, protecting the planet. It came from the pitons, you know, they were destroying the rock face with these pitons that they were bashing in. So he just started his blacksmithing and started making these pitons that you could remove, right? But he never intended to start a business. And then, you know, you build something and it becomes this big, giant, you know, organization. And then you got to be so careful with that because it's then, you know, you've got responsibility to make sure it's not doing the very thing that you started it for in the first place. And, you know, this whole idea about playing in centuries, you know, playing a long game and your purpose around, you know, helping people make better decisions. It's like what mechanisms, you know, have you thought about strategically, like what mechanisms you would put in place, whether it was in like a company charter or some kind of like safeguard to make sure or, you know, to embed that complexity to kind of keep it on track, you know, when you're not around to guide it. Yeah. And it's a big question, you know, like I'm not, it's.
So, you know, I don't know if we have a charter as such. We have leadership principles, values.
I'm not sure if charter is the right word, but like, yeah, like some kind of, like document or something that kind of, would guide this decision.
I think it's great. No, I think it's something we probably need to add. That's my first instinct on that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something we have. I think we've been dealing with a lot of 5-10 year problems.
Yeah.
And most recently more even shorter term.
Yeah.
Because, obviously went through a lot of turbulence. That was sort of more 12 monthly problems, 6 monthly even.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough, bumpy ride. But we got through that, I think, and we're still working on it. And I think it's still changing and evolving right now. The market's really, but, I think one of the things that might be tough with that is, I sort of don't really mind what the format or sort of manifestation of that is, because it's going to be very varied and changing and evolving. I think what's is important, but is I think our principles will help with that to a large degree. And so that, affects the leaders that we hire. And based on those leaders, we then can, score them, and they can, they have these principles to live up to. Obviously, we have values as well. And normally, I think that's at least a good kick down field. And I'm hoping, those principles. We also have sort of playbooks. There's a black book of Finder sort of, it goes through. These are things that we do. This is our approaches that we use in certain moments. And a lot of those, I think, are baked into, obviously, I think it's just really baked into the people. And so I'm hoping that those principles help to guide that. But I do think you're right. There's probably a bigger document that could come together to serve Finder.
Yeah. I just thought that was so amazing that Yvonne actually, he did that. And just listening to you talking, it like the authenticity around your organization, and you're really putting your heart into it. There's a lot of synergy there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that and where you go. What does a world look like, where people are making informed decisions? How do you see that as like a vision,
Well, the way I sort of see this is decisions are about the future. You don't need to make a decision about the past because it's done. So you're very forward-looking. Now, you can use knowledge, in other words, some sort of organized catalog of the past. That's what I think knowledge is, to a large degree. Proven with probably scientifically or how it's manifested. And unfortunately, what's really tough is that the actual past doesn't do a good job of predicting the future. You can only sort of try and guide and anticipate as best you can, but most forecasts are terrible. Most predictions are as well. And that's because of, like what you're talking about, is the complexity of human emotions is very, very varied. The universe we're in has got a lot of variables, and we don't quite have the computing power yet to do a great job of that. So the way I sort of think of it is to build essentially a very, very strong system or platform that does really, really well at adapting. Adaption is what most biological systems in this version of the multiverse we're in do really well. The ones that adapt to whatever is happening or going on survive. So what I'm hoping is that this version or this system, this future, is a platform or a system that it evolves and it moves and it adapts and it changes based on what's going on, based on where you're at, and it's alive. It's an ecosystem. I don't necessarily know how that's going to manifest yet, but that's obviously a big idea for the future. But that's how I've always seen it. I've always seen it as something which is alive.
Yeah.
And adapting and moving and changing. And Finder's always been like that. We've always got this uncomfortableness of constantly being slightly changing about something, or we live in a constant state of slightly uncomfortable continuously, always slightly unfinished, but okay about that, and completing and improving and as best we can. So I think it's some mechanism, machine, system that you are subscribed to that's constantly adapting in some way, shape, or form.
You talk about natural systems there, or relating to natural systems, and a lot of that's decentralization. Being the crypto, is the crypto king your self-dubbed title, or is that what people have just started calling you, or what?
I think people have started writing about that. I was like, okay.
So, and knowing about that technology and and decentralization, what do we need to know about that for I guess long and short term?
So I think decentralized systems have a large amount of, if they're tested, but anti-fragility, which is really interesting as a concept and as an idea. And they enable a lot of sovereignty, self-sovereignty, like owning your own stuff. And they allow a lot more access and inclusion, because they're permissionless, right? So you don't need to ask someone to go and use the technology or get involved because they're decentralized. So I think those are pretty strong overriding macro trends. And I think a great example that we've just seen in the last sort of, I'd say, 25 years is the internet. The internet is an incredible decentralized network. And in the beginning of it, they were debating about whether to make it a paid system. So you pay to go on the internet. And the internet is actually one of the ideas that actually a big group came together and actually ensured that the internet was free. That's a big idea. And I think that's a good example and a great system that has enabled the Cambrian explosion of knowledge sharing and information, real time. Like, I think people in ancient history and really talked about this idea of the great galactic library of humanity. We kind of have that on our phone.
The Library of Alexandria or something.
That was probably the beginning.
Yeah.
And then now we, I think we walk around literally with an encyclopedia or like a pretty good catalog of anything you want in your, and that's a incredibly powerful thing for humans. I think someone asked Einstein once, hey, what's your phone number? He said, just a minute, I just got to go check the phone book. So that's the kind of pattern that we've now gone into, and we don't carry these facts around. We instead, just access them at our fingertips continuously. And so then our minds are freed up to a large degree of not, repetitionally learning. And I think what that indexes into the future is more creativity. More creativity, more interesting problems to go and solve, and more time spent doing that and mastering that. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting overriding thesis. I've actually forgotten your question.
Decentralization.
Kind of wanted to know about
decentralization
and crypto.
What should we know
as well? Yeah.
Well, I think I love this idea of decentralization. I think it's great.
Complexity.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes more complexity. I think
which is good.
Yeah, I think I think what's really interesting with that as well is it removes single points of failure. I think that's a really important principle and idea in my mind. I think when I look at crypto, it's really this system that's sort of building alongside another system, a good financial system which has helped us and served us for a long period of time. Yeah, it's got its kinks, and it's lots of currencies have come and inflated away and died, just like cryptocurrencies. Like, everyone says, oh, there's 20,000 crypto coins and a lot of them have died. Go to Wikipedia and look at the number of currencies that have come and gone. Like, I don't know if anyone accepts Roman dineros anymore. Not really into the German Deutschmark either.
No.
Lots and lots of currencies throughout human history have come and way more and just have come and completely died.
Yeah.
So I think that idea is a natural idea, and like I think there are going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of cryptocurrencies created in the future. That's perfectly fine and natural. But it's a system I think everyone should at least go and have a look at. Like, here is something there's clearly something going on. And I think what the sort of the entry point or journey onto that is, is normally starts with Bitcoin to some extent. And then what you tend to go down and start to look at is, I think, what is money? That idea, I think it's a very interesting idea. Like, and money is really, to a large degree, about a store of time, or
energy,
or a store of energy,
currency.
Yeah. Really fundamentally, most, of these things are trying to store energy over a long period of time. Like, so how do you store your energy and that's what humans have been trying to do for long, long periods of time. And normally what we do is we find things that are really scarce. So we thought, glass beads are really scarce. We thought salt was really scarce. We thought there's the ray stones in Polynesia, which they're these giant stones that people still trade and they have value. And I think Bitcoin is fundamentally it's very hard to see, but over the long term, its scarcity, there'll only ever be 21 million of them. There's huge amounts of computing energy and power that go to protect that. And that's what you're essentially getting. You're getting this energy just stored up. And, I don't see that slowing down or stopping. And what I think is really interesting about it is you've got a transfer for the first time of people holding their own money in a digital way and have self-sovereignty of that. Versus, what we've seen over the last, since 1694, since when the Bank of England was created, and slowly over time through the Peel's Act in the 1800s, became the monopoly of currency, right? And this has happened through lots of countries, and that has enabled countries to quietly tax people through inflation. Inflation is really just another tax. Which inflates your money away, so you have to work harder, and then your tax rates go up because you earn more money, and essentially that's the way the system works. And that's actually, but there's a system in that, and it's served us. But I think this is the first time when money can be self-sovereignly held digitally, and it's very, very hard for anyone else to come and manipulate that because it's running on code. And that's a very, very powerful idea. And I think it's well worth going and having a look at that. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the genesis point, I think, of a lot of those things. Then there's a whole series of other things that, surround that I think are very interesting as well. But I think that idea is well worth exploring. Just Googling, like, what is money, and I think that's, where that sort of starts, and where cryptocurrency where it goes, I think is, I think it's got a very big future ahead.
What about the threat of digital currencies becoming centralized in terms of, like, governments rolling out their, centralized versions of this? Yeah. Is that something we need to be aware of as well? Like, because it kind of feels like it's like there's this whole freedom, decentralization, sovereignty story, and then there's also this, like, rollout of, like, a government digital system, and you're like, oh, like, how? Yeah. What about that?
So we already have a government digital currency. It's on our, cell phones and in our banking apps. Like, we don't actually hold any of that money. It's just numbers on a screen. Yeah. So I think that's already happened to a large degree. Whether it's, like, actually on the blockchain and seen and, that's a different story. That's a public ledger. Will it be a public ledger? That's another whole question as well. But I'm actually very bullish for that. I'd love to see central banks go and put their, balance sheets and wallets and everything on the public ledger, so we can actually go and see that. And then let's go and have a look at what's happening inside, governments and things like that. Let's bring it on. I think what it'll also do is, but it will actually bring a Cambrian explosion again on the other side. So people who don't want to do that, they're going to go, what's the alternative? I don't want to use that. And this idea is called free banking. So free banking, again, used to be you go back to the 1600s or even before then, banks used to just print their own money locally. You would take your piece of gold and you're like, oh man, carrying this around is pretty intense. And gold is genuinely heavy, and silver, it's like full on. Like I need to like have some sort of more easy way to, conduct commerce. Okay, I'm just going to go give this to this organization, and they would locally print some paper. And different pieces of paper from different banks had different sort of, harder and softer values. Like, oh, that's a bit of a sketchy bank. They've once done something, or this one's a pretty solid one, And so the Bank of England was a pretty solid one because it was, they lent money to the king, and he went and fought a war. So the king was like, had a debt. And so if the king had a debt and he was taxing people, well, he's probably going to pay his money back. So their money's pretty good. And, that's sort of where that sort of formed. So I think this idea of, introducing the central bank currency and all the other currencies around it will actually bring way more people into crypto as well. And that there is another system, there is an other, I actually think is a really good thing. And I think it'll be very interesting to the analysis that will be done on a central bank digital currency and what will start to happen there. If people imagine they did chain analysis and looked at all the blockchain transactions inside the government, and actually what actually went down, I think it would be quite interesting. Like what actually happens here.
Yeah. I'm just aware of the time because I know we need to get you back, and we could probably be asking you questions for hours, to be honest.
Keep riffing, but where do people go to find you, Fred?
So I think hop on TikTok, Instagram. You just type my name in. LinkedIn's good as well. I don't dance on TikTok, but I try to put out educational content as best I can, or something interesting that I'm finding and sharing. But yeah, they're really good two venues to reach out.
Amazing. And thank you so much for coming in today. I can't believe we got you to the shack.
Yeah.
Shout outs to Michelle too for making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Most things wouldn't happen without Michelle.
Makes it happen. What a legend. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So, and you can find our accounts. This is obviously the Design on Purpose podcast. We're on TikTok as well, just getting started on there. On Instagram at Design on Purpose. And you can follow our design agency, WordPlay Studio, on there as well. But our website's wordplaystudio.com.
Thank you for sharing your space. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing. And thanks everyone for listening.
Amazing. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.